Folks, welcome to another episode of the Locked On Pitt podcast. And C'Bo Flemister is coming to Pitt. We'll talk about him, but we're also going to talk a little bit more about the Pitt basketball team, Dior Johnson, relative expectations we could have for that team. We're also going to talk about Pitt's offense. Carter Warren yesterday saying not too many changes, but will they miss Jordan Addison so much that they might have to make changes? I'll be joined by Cale Berger of 93.7 The Fan and Pittsburgh Sports Now today to talk about all those things on this episode of the Locked On Pitt podcast.
Are Locked On Pitt, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Panthers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome here to the Locked On Pitt podcast. As always, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, do all those great things. If you're listening to this, make sure to leave a review, give me some feedback, and I would then like to welcome in my good friend, colleague, Cale Berger here. Cale, how's it going, man?
What's up, brother? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Cale, you haven't been on this show in I think since the season, right?
Yeah, it's been since the 2021 season. It's been a little bit, but happy to be back.
Yeah, I think the last time you were on, we were talking ourselves off the ledge after Pitt had just lost to Western Michigan.
And you know what? I was right at the time. I was calming you and everyone else down, and you know what? Things worked out pretty well.
You can say that again. I think everyone's ecstatic about where this Pitt football program is right now, and hard not to be. You just feel the buzz. It's a little different around Heinz Field and the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex nowadays. And you check out Pitt getting a ton of transfers, and a new one today in C'Bo Flemister from Notre Dame, a guy that hasn't played a ton at Notre Dame, but got in that rotation. And Pitt adds to the running back room. They had just lost Jordan Bailey last week, so they didn't have their 2022 recruit anymore. So the running back room was a little thin in terms of actual bodies rather than, say, depth. I think they have 5 capable guys now. I mean, this is an extremely deep running back room.
Yeah, there's a lot to like about what the Panthers have at running back and really across this entire offense, but that group especially, the offensive line returning, and then you have all these veteran running backs, and a lot of them have, and it's a good balance because they all have a ton of experience, but they also don't have a lot of, wear on their tread, so to speak, as well. You have Izzy Abanikanda, you got Vincent Davis, you have Daniel Carter being the kind of breakout star of the spring as well. So like you said, many capable guys, and it gives the Panthers and Frank Cignetti a lot of kind of tools and weapons to work with and fool around with and have some fun with. But also, they have that kind of bona fide running back rotation that you're looking for, right? And they can go to Izzy like they did in stretches last year, or Rodney Hammond at the end of games. They can do those sorts of things, when they prefer one guy over the other. But it's good to have a lot of horses in the stable, right? And they're just adding that with C'Bo Flemister and just another weapon that the Panthers have on this offense at their disposal.
Yeah, and Flemister, one of those veteran guys that is down for whatever he's trying to do. And Pitt lost a good bit of their running back rotation to the transfer portal last year. That have, the vets that have been phased out, like A.J. Davis and Todd Sibley. They all left. Then Pitt lost Jordan Bailey. Then Malik Newton before last season couldn't come. So Pitt only had 4 scholarship running backs on the roster. Now they have a 5th guy there in C'Bo Flemister, who, again, the stats don't jump off the page from his Notre Dame games, but he does have some really good power in his game. He's a pretty sturdy back. You look at him, he doesn't have great speed, but he's physical, really good in the red zone. He's a guy that came out as a pretty highly thought after guy, and he has 2 years of eligibility left. And I think that is something that I can't overlook here either. The 2 years of eligibility, he has his graduate year this year, then his super senior year next year, because we kind of don't talk about this enough, but Pitt doesn't have a lot of stability past this year at that running back spot. Vincent Davis is a senior, could go to the NFL. Izzy, if he has a good year, I think he could go to the NFL. Daniel Carter is going to be a redshirt junior. He could be here next year as well. Rodney Hammond's the real only short guy that is going to be here next year, in my opinion. So this is not I think this is a move as much for this year as it is for next year. because you add a guy like Flemister coming from Notre Dame that has played, has showcased some good things, specifically in the power department, the vision department, and the physicality department. And you can maybe get him into the rotation next year, especially if you lose Vincent Davis and Izzy Abanikanda, which I think is a very realistic possibility after the 2022 season.
Yeah, you outlined those recruits that the Panthers lost or guys that never made it here. And that is the big thing, that with all those guys that could be moving on after this season, it's good to give yourself some insurance moving in the next season. You know Rodney Hammond is more than likely going to be here. Other than that, though, you have to make sure you're protecting yourself, especially if you go out into, the next year's recruiting class and, maybe you don't end up with the running backs you want or supplementing that position as well. This is college football in 2022, right? You have to go to the portal. You have to take advantage of that, and you have to hit home runs in the portal. And obviously that will remain to be seen with what Flemister is able to provide, but you have to go out and make sure you are maximizing the portal as much as possible. And, it's not just at running back with this addition. It's really what Pat Narduzzi's done, I think, all offseason is some really great additions in that area.
Yeah, and let's just look at Flemister's line. His career line, 25 games played, 110 rushes, 471 yards, 10 touchdowns. Again, not a flashy line, but a guy that has proven to be able to do what you need him to do and has been able to really come in a pinch for the Fighting Irish whenever asked to do so, which I think is important for Pitt to look at, to know that they have another capable guy. I also think that something you've noted this entire season, adding two linebackers in Shane Simon and Tyler Wiltz to that core, adding even more to the wide receiver core. That was before Jordan Addison left. They added Bub Means after adding Kadade Mumfield. They add Derek Kyler to the quarterback room. We're seeing the depth kind of being built out. They had two tight end transfers as well, in Carter Johnson and Dylan Devaney. I think that maybe Narduzzi learned a lesson last year with his wide receiver core when you had Taysir Mack, Jalen Barton, Melky Stovall all banged up throughout the season. And it was really just Addison and Wayne at one point, and you were throwing out guys that didn't get a lot of playing time or weren't ready to play. Jaden Bradley probably got a little bit more tread than maybe they wanted him to get last year. And I think he's taking this as a note of saying, it could happen anywhere. It could happen at running back. We could have a scenario where all of Izzy, Vincent Davis, and Rodney Hammond are hurt. Like, this is a possibility. And then Flemister becomes a featured back, and you need as much depth as you can. So filling out all of those 85 scholarships, which it seems like they are intended to do, is a smart strategy to me to prevent something like that happening yet again.
Yeah, you can't leave yourself exposed in that kind of sense. You have to kind of cross your T's and dot your I's in every way possible. And I think Pat Narduzzi's done a really good job of that. I think he's done a really good job, because this is still, we forget how long, with how long he's been here, this is still his first head coaching job. And I think he's really grown over the years and adapted well and changed things and identified the shifting landscape in college football and learned from mistakes and learned how to do things a little bit better. And I think we continue to see him kind of mature in those areas as a head coach. I want to add about Flemister too. I mean, you mentioned his size and being like a goal line guy, especially in the red zone. I think that's going to be big for the Panthers this year because, a lot of times last year with Lucas Kroll and Bartholomew and, some of the other weapons they had and just having Kenny Pickett, a lot of the times they were opting to throw down there in the red zone or even at the goal line too, even though they had the offensive line and the running backs to be more balanced there. I think now, though, not having Kenny to make those decisions in that tight area, not that you don't trust the other guys as much, but he was Kenny Pickett last year. I think it really benefits him a lot to have a big bruising running back that can just, go right up the middle and make it easy for you. Because, this is going to be a different offensive scheme. Cignetti is a power run guy. I mean, you look at some of the running backs he had, especially at Boston College, but throughout his career. I think they're going to do that a lot more this year. They're going to maybe need to. But it's good to have that in your arsenal, and I think the Flemister can help that out.
Yeah, and I want to touch on that a little bit more. But before we do that, I'm going to let you guys know about Built Bar because Built Bar is coming out with a new flavor, folks. They're rolling another one out. This one is known as Mud Pie. It's another amazing flavor. You're probably asking yourself, what in the world is a mud pie? Well, a mud pie is covered in 100% real chocolate with chocolate mousse, rich whipped cream, 100% real chocolate. It tastes like cookies and cream. but with even more chocolate on top. You've got to try this as soon as possible, folks. And guess what? This Built Bar, it's only 150 calories with only 5 grams of sugar with over 18 grams of protein. So you have a protein bar that can taste delicious. You got the taste and the health factor with Built Bar's Mud Pie. So go to built.com, use the promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. Use the promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Pitt podcast. Here with Cale Berger, talking a little bit of Pitt football right now. And C'Bo Flemister kind of committing is a nice leeway, I think to go into the running game as a whole. We've heard this a lot, and Carter Warren talked yesterday about this is not going to be a super different offense. But if we know anything about Frank Cignetti from his past, both at Pitt and Boston College and elsewhere, the running game might be a very important part of this offense this year, Kale.
Yeah, I'm expecting them to be a little more balanced, not only because Kenny Pickett's no longer here, but also we talked about that stable of running backs they have. The offensive line is so veteran, they can do either, very, very well. But yeah, Frank Cignetti, I've talked to a lot of former Pitt players, Doran Dickerson's a coworker of mine, a buddy of mine. He obviously had his All-American season playing under Frank Cignetti. And one of the things that he really, summed up Cignetti's approach being that he puts his best players in a position to succeed, which seems like such a basic thing for an offensive coordinator to do. But really, he looks at his guys' strength and looks for the way to maximize those and make sure that they can put them in the best position to succeed. And he's done that in the past everywhere he's been. And I firmly believe he's going to do that here at Pitt, whether it's the tight end position like he did with Doran back in the day, or whether he's going to do that with these running backs like we saw at Boston College, like I mentioned earlier. He is going to find a way to be creative and get these guys the ball in a multitude of different ways. So especially in the run game, when you have the type of running backs he has at his disposal, Izzy and Hammond and Davis and all of these guys, I firmly believe and have full confidence in Frank Cignetti that he's going to find unique ways and mix these guys in and give them all opportunities to really have success.
And I think that's going to be the big part of it is the run game last year, and I talked about this a little bit last year. I didn't think it was all that important to them. They just could throw the ball wherever. No one's going to match Pitt man to man. This year, I'm not sure that's going to be the case. I think people might be able to match their receiving core. I think it's going to be a really good receiving core. I like Kanade Mumfield. I like Gavin Bartholomew. I like Jared Wayne. I like Bub Means. I like Jalen Barton. I like Jaden Bradley. I like these guys. But you don't have Jordan Addison. And I think that, and I want to talk about this because, the guys – down on the south side, they're supporting Addison. But I do think that you could, while you might be able to replace, say, 80% of Jordan Addison with Kanade Mumfield, who I think is a complete stud. The one thing you might not be able to replace is his magnetism, what he does to defenses, and kind of just the otherworldly ability he has. We're talking about a guy who easily has an argument to be the best wide receiver in the landscape of football. And so that's where I think we come to balance running game, and seeing maybe putting a little bit more shoulder on the load of someone like Izzy Abanikanda or someone like Rodney Hammond and Vincent Davis. And leaning on your offensive line, all 5 of them are back. I think that's a big thing that we have to talk about too, right? The change of the guard is in the passing game. It's no Lucas Kroll, no Kenny Pickett, no Jordan Addison, no Taysier Mack. You have new guys there. But the running game components, the offensive line and the running backs, they're all here still.
Yeah, and last year it was the passing game for Pitt that obviously got all the headlines, right? Kenny and Addison and Mark Whipple and all of that. But, the running game was actually pretty vital for Pitt, and it ended up being that way at the end of games. It was that, there's many names for it, the 6-minute drill, the 8-minute drill, trying to burn clock and just get out of games, right? And the Panthers did a really great job of that in a lot of their wins last year of just going full-on power run game. We are going to run it down the opponent's throat. We need to burn clock. They know we're going to do it. And they couldn't stop them. In part, that's a credit to that offensive line. Part of it's a credit to the running backs as well. But for all the high-flying, high-powered passing attack, that they largely were and were assumed to be, they were a very good team at just stuffing it down people's throats and really just running them over and getting out of games as quickly as possible. So, I think especially too with, a different quarterback situation as well. When you have Kenny Pickett, you're going to put the ball in his hands because you trust him more than anyone else. And he's more often than not going to make the play. Not that you don't trust Keaton Slovis or Nick Patty, because you will enough to make one of them your starter. But it's also making things a little easier on those guys and knowing that this is probably our most sure strength right now heading into the season. Let's definitely rely on that.
Yeah, I can think you mentioned running out the end of games. I can think of a few games where that happened.
Yeah.
Tennessee at the end.
Hmm.
Virginia Tech was the banner of this. Remember, they ran out,
Oh,
I think,
yeah.
a 10-minute drive
Yeah.
to end the
Yeah.
game in Blacksburg. It was clinical. They just moved down the field continuously against that team. So that was something I thought that you were completely hitting the nail on the head on. They did it in the ACC championship a little bit, even.
It did it in every win. I mean, literally every win last year, and there were many of them. Every win was sealed the same way. And that's very impressive because a lot of teams talk about that, but not a lot of teams are actually able to execute it. And Pitt really did last year.
Yeah, and it gave Pitt a dynamic type of offense to do whatever the heck they wanted.
Yeah.
But I think now we're going to have to see that offensive line kind of jump to the front, right? We're going to have to see Carter Warren and Jake Cradle and all these guys step to the forefront. I'm not even sure if we're going to have the same starting offensive line because I think that there's such depth on this O line that someone could maybe sneak in there, but the offensive line, I think, is going to be a huge storyline. And I think that running game that you've talked about is going to be big. Now, I'm not saying that, they're not going to pass the ball and they're not going to try for explosive plays. Of course they are. Keaton Slovis is good enough to do that. Nick Patty's good enough to do that. Whoever wins the job will throw the ball. But I also think when you look at the running game, and it's an adage, that's been proven wrong that, the running game, you don't need to have a good running game to have a good play action game. But also, when you do have a good running game, it makes the play action game that just more lethal. And so I think if you do
And
that, you
easier.
talked about easing the load on, say, a Keaton Slovis or a Nick Patty. If you have a good running game and teams have to fear Izzy Abanikanda, well, Keaton Slovis is going to have Kanade Mumfield over the middle of the field wide open for big plays. And I think that's really the connective tissue here that's going to make this work.
Yeah, and not only does it make the play action game more lethal, like you said, it just makes it easier, right? I mean, not that you're not going to sell the fakes as hard or anything like that, but the play action game doesn't have to be as intricate, and it's not as much, tricking them with route combinations and all of the other flashy stuff like that. It's just they are in fear of you running the ball at them, and that makes everything that much more wide open and that much easier. With the wide receivers, and I wanted to bring it back to Jordan Addison because you mentioned him obviously earlier to start this conversation. It's obviously a loss. And I think what the Pitt wide receivers are going to have to figure out is, it's one thing to be successful and to get open and to make plays when, half of the field is concerned with Jordan Addison. It's another thing to do all those things when, it's kind of a level playing field across the board. And I think Mumfield especially is going to have to deal with that. I mean, he was coming in expecting to be the number 2 and probably would have feasted in that role as the number 2 with Jordan Addison drawing so much coverage, kind of like what we saw with the Pittsburgh Steelers with Antonio Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster, right? I mean, Juju was the number 2 and he feasted because everyone paid attention to AB. It's kind of similar, or was going to be similar with Addison and Mumfield. And, they're still very talented though. They still have a lot of guys that can make plays in that room. So it's obviously a huge loss to lose the Blitnikoff winner, but it's not like the cupboard is bare for the Panthers.
Yeah, it's certainly not. And again, I think there are good receivers in this room. I think Mumfield has the chance to be a really great receiver. I think he has a chance to be an all ACC player this year. He was a freshman All American. We can't overlook that.
Yeah.
And he routinely played at a high level and at Akron. And Jared Wayne also is maybe the most underrated player on this entire offense that, he's just kind of there, but he does everything right. A very smart player, smooth. Yeah. And then you look at the other guys. I mean, there's questions behind that, but the talent isn't a question. Jalen Barton, Jaden Bradley, Bub Means, Addison Copeland, Che Nwabuko, who is an incoming freshman, is just setting track records down in Texas. Texas, folks, that's not a easy thing to do. So Pitt has so many bodies that are going to be at receiver and a lot of talent. It's just going to be, well, who steps up outside of the 2 we know?
I'm really excited about Barden. He has not, I think, had the impact yet that he or Pitt has wanted or, Pitt fans have kind of hoped for. And a lot of it is just, due to a lot of mouths to feed in the wide receiver room over the last couple of years. The other part is he's dealt with injuries too. But I think, in the opportunities that Barden has had, I think he's made great plays. He's shown great vertical speed to get behind defenses. He's made plays down the field. And that's one of the things that Pitt will need. I mean, Addison and Taysier Mack, really last year especially, did that well, that duo, getting down the field and catching those vertical passes. I think a lot of that's going to fall on Barden now to be that big play receiver kind of over the top. We know he has the speed. He's shown it in flashes. It's just a matter of staying on the field and producing like that. And I'm excited to see what he can do this year.
Yeah, and I think that is definitely something to look out for. I think he would have had that opportunity had he not befallen an injury after Taysier Mack got hurt. And remember, he got hurt making an unbelievable acrobatic catch against Miami. So Jalen Barden has showcased a lot of good things. I'm excited to see what he can do. Pitt has two really explosive receivers in him and Bub Means, both of those guys, speed dudes. Barden, kind of your traditional-ish guy, and then Means is your height, weight, speed guy to look at. But I want to pivot over now to basketball because this is obviously going to be the talk of the land. Jeff Capel and Pitt men's basketball folks have some momentum. First, we're going to go to a little quick break. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Pitt podcast. Kale, we're going to talk a little bit of Pitt hoops here, and how could you not? We talked about Dior Johnson on here. We talked about Carlton Carrington on here. Both of those guys, top 100 commits this week alone, and that was before, everything kind of seemed to come together. It looks like Jeff Capel, who we thought after the loss against Boston College in the ACC tournament, I thought he was a dead man walking. Really, wow. This has to be one of the most impressive off seasons I've seen by a college coach in recent memory.
Yeah, and I think what we are seeing is hopefully for Jeff Capel's sake and for Pitt, hopefully we're seeing something similar to what we've seen from a lot of other teams, and especially right here in our own backyard in the ACC. We saw with Wake Forest completely overhauling their program through the transfer portal and turning their team from, mediocre to a contender the next year, this past season. Hopefully we're seeing kind of the same thing with Pitt here. And I have to say, the Dior Johnson one especially, really came out of nowhere on Tuesday. This is a guy with obviously a very kind of a different trajectory to this point, originally committed to Syracuse and Oregon. He went to like a bunch of different high schools and stuff as well. So a very unorthodox path here, but there's no denying the talent, right? A top 40 player in the country, number 7 point guard, depending on what site you look at. He can score it. He can pass it. He can be that floor general. He can be that scorer for you. This is what the Pitt has needed for a while. And, I firmly believe that I don't mean to make it too oversimplified, but college basketball is about great guard play. You can have good bigs, you can have a lot of different things, but you have to have elite guard play if you want to be a good team in college basketball, especially in the ACC. And I think for the first time, we haven't seen what they do on the court yet, obviously, but you look at this depth chart for Pitt and they are loaded at guard. Not only with Dior Johnson, but you bring in Nelly Cummings too, and what he did getting Fordham to the tournament last year. And then now what's the rotation? You got Burton and Nike coming off the bench. This is a really, really exciting group of guards the Panthers have, and probably the deepest of that position by far they've been under Jeff Capel, which I think pairing that with John Hughley is very, very exciting to me. And like I said, hopefully this is the beginnings of what we've seen from a lot of other programs where they can just kind of turn it around in the age of the transfer portal in 1 year.
Oh, yeah. It is one of those things that you look at and say, where the heck did this guard room come from? Did anyone expect after Femio Ducali transferred to Seton Hall that Pitt would end up with the guard room looking like this? This is a good guard room.
Ithiel Horton too, leaving.
Yeah. So you lost Ithiel Horton, you lost Femio Ducali, arguably your two best guards last year. With Burton kind of getting worn down at the end because he just had to play so much, and his physical style of basketball just wore him down as the season went on. Now you have 6 capable guys. Legitimately, there's 6 capable guards in this room, and all do different types of things. Dior Johnson's a true point. Nelly Cummings can be a point, but it can also be an off-ball guy. Greg Elliott's your three-point sniper. That's the Ithiel Horton replacement. They also got another three-point sniper in Cassius McNeely, though, out of the JUCO ranks. So that was good. And then you return your two main vets. Jamarius Burton, you know what he can do. He's a great leader on the floor. He'll keep everyone in check. And then you also look at a guy like Nike Sabandi coming off the torn ACL, and you're excited to get him back because what he did at the end of 2021 was some very exciting stuff. He flashed a lot of really good things to you. I think he shot with 43% from three-point range. If he can continue that, you're going to love that. And then I think I'll say this. If this team doesn't work out, I think the issue is going to be at the four specifically. The one biggest question you're going to have coming into this year is, well, how did you replace Mogi? And the answer is, I don't think they did. I don't think they did replace Mogi. So you're going to need a few things. One, you're going to need John Hughley to take a step defensively and be that rim protector that you need. You're going to need Blake Hinson, who hasn't played in 2 years, to be your starting four. Could get dicey. We'll see how that ends up. And then I think you also put some pressure on guys like Will Jeffress and the Diaz-Graham twins. Granted, though, I think that these guys are intriguing. I really like the Diaz-Graham twins a lot, what they project to be. I think Hinson has a lot of upside. Remember, last time he started, he was at Ole Miss, and he was a double-digit guy in the SEC. That's always a good sign if he can get back to that level. I think that's the only question. That's the big question mark that's going to loom over this team. But I'll tell you what, Kale, I think the makings of a team here that could maybe be in the top half of the ACC, which is just a revelation.
Yeah, and I think, back to the guards especially, like all those guys you listed off, I mean, I think the biggest thing that stands out to me is you look at Pitt in recent years, and it's really been offensive, right? They haven't been able to score at the clip they've needed to, and a lot of it's from a lack of three-point shooting. They kind of basically for the last couple of years had one reliable, consistent three-point shooter, whether it was, your Ryan Murphys or your Ithiel Hortons, guys like that. I mean, now they got a plethora of guys that can make threes, that can get their own shot, which is always important at that level. And then they have guys that can facilitate as well. So to have like six guys that can do all of that is just so big for Pitt, obviously, and it's going to make such a difference for them, heading into next season. I got to give Jeff Capel a lot of credit for this. And like, here's the thing with Jeff Capel is, he has gone for these big fish in the past. And unfortunately, it's just been bad luck where he hasn't been able to land these guys. But he's been in, the final three, the final five for a lot of these top, 4-star recruits. And, they've had guys committed like Jalen Hoods-Scafino or Mintz, or they've had these guys kind of in their sights. And things, unfortunately, haven't worked out. And now, it took a little while, but finally getting one of these guys. I got to give Jeff Capel credit for sealing the deal here. And now, the Panthers, I don't want to get too hyped and excited when it's in June, but I'm really excited about what this team could look like and do next year, just based on paper. The roster he has assembled in such a short amount of time.
I think that's the biggest thing, is that there's actually excitement. I feel like I felt 2.5 months ago at the middle of March, folks, I felt the fan base almost be apathetic to watching another year. As more trickled out, it became very clear Jeff Capel was not going to be fired because the huge buyout number, right? I mean, that was the obvious thing that kind of just came out. And that was the question kind of hanging over his head. And really what started the ball rolling was John Hughley coming back. And then Jeff Capel just went to work. And this whole staff went to work. And they put in a ton of work. And the thing about Pitt this year, in terms of the portal, that I give them a lot of credit for, is they did miss out on a lot of guys. They missed out on Akuk, Michi Johnson, Milajal Poteet. I mean, these are some guys they were after that they tried to get in on, and they thought that they even got them on campus. But in the past, usually, they would go all in on, say, one or two guys, right? Efton Reed last year brings that to kind of a head. This year, though, it felt like they were recruiting lots of guys. They were getting ins on a lot of guys. They were closing out on guys. And they assembled a really good roster here. I think the staff did a fantastic job this offseason. I think Jeff Capel had a vision he wanted for his team. And maybe after as many years as he's been here, I think he had to maybe step back for a second and readjust his expectations. He's, coming in, probably thought, man, I can follow a Duke-like model, and it just wasn't going to work at Pitt. And so I think now pushing that to the forefront, Pitt's got a identity for what they want to do. They want to shoot the ball. They want to be known for good guard play, and they want to be known they're going to kick your ass down low. Like, that's what they want to be known by. They are going to 100% just going to play big bully ball down there. You're not going to out physical them with John Hughley. Even the Diaz-Graham twins, they're a little, lean, but they play physical. And the guards play physical. Jamarius Burton's one of the most physical guards in the ACC, and they have a certain identity. It does feel like a almost Big East type like identity, almost to me. I think that's what Jeff Capel's kind of embraced. He's kind of embraced the past fabric that has made Pitt team successful, and he's assembled a nice squad here.
Yeah, I totally get that feeling and that vibe from this team as well. And I think just to add on to what you said about John Hughley, what's so great about adding all these shooters and guys that can make shots is John Hughley's always been a great passer out of the post. And especially if they're limited in terms of who they have down low to play there with him. And it's going to be a lot of teams collapsing in on him because he's not catching anyone by surprise this year, right? They know who John Hughley is. They know the damage he can do down low. But he's also such a talented passer from the low block that he'll get those double teams. He'll get trapped down there. But you know what? He's going to be able to find these shooters out in the corner, on the wing, at the top of the key. And this year, maybe more likely those guys will hit those shots. And that's obviously going to be so big for Pitt's offense.
Yeah, and that is a big thing to look at. I think the fact that they have legitimate shooters this year is just going to add so much spacing to the floor. Dior Johnson can shoot the three. Nelly Cummings is a 36% three-point shooter. He's worked off ball and has shot really well in that role. Burton's not a sniper, but he can make it when he's open. Your real three snipers are going to be Cassius McNeely and Greg Elliott, who are your two catch-and-shoot guys that can just shoot lights out. I mean, Elliott's a legitimately elite guy shooting over 40% on his career at Marquette. So that was a big add. And then you add in a guy like Jorge Diaz-Graham, who at the four is a 6'11 guy that shot 44% at IMG this past year from three-point range. Doesn't mean he's going to shoot 44% in college, but I mean, that you think that at least can go, even if he shoots at like 35% at the four, you're going to take that. And that's a huge thing, I think, for Pitt to really add to this room. And Nike Sabandi, who knows what he ends up shooting as well. But for the first time under Jeff Capel, I think for the first time since 2021, this team feels like they can shoot the basketball.
Yeah, and Nike especially, he's going to be so big for Pitt, and they missed him so much last year because Jeff Capel talked a lot about early on in the season, like the type of plan that they had, the type of offense that they were going to run, and they had set this up all off season, and they had these plans in place, and then Nike tears the ACL, Ithiel gets suspended, and kind of everything went awry, and they had to rebuild on the fly to start last season. Getting Nike back into the fold, I think, is so big and maybe even underappreciated for what it means for Pitt, because he really is like that Lou Williams kind of role for Pitt. He can be that guy that comes in off the bench, be the sixth man, and just be instant offense, right? You give him the ball, he can make, because he can get his own shot. He's got enough, tools in his bag to be able to get himself free, and he can hit the mid-range jumpers. He can hit the threes. And just good guard play overall, those are the guys you really need in college basketball. Guys that can just get their own shot are so valuable, and also, amazingly so rare. And so that's such a big boon for Pitt as well to get him back in the fold.
Yeah, again, I think I don't want to, there's hope here. I don't want to put like a ton of expectations on Pitt because this team has a pretty wide range of outcomes. I think their ceiling is definitely NCAA tournament. I think they have a legit NCAA tournament team here potentially.
Yeah.
I think the realistic expectation to start out with is the NIT. I think that's a realistic bar to clear. They definitely could completely bust and miss everything. We'll see. The range of outcomes are everywhere right now, but the fact that there is this amount of talent on this team is what gives, I think, fans and everyone else watching this hope. And you hope you get to see some of that renewed energy in the Pete, because, Kale, you and I both know when the Pete is just rocking, man.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing better. It is a special environment. It's a one-of-a-kind environment in the landscape of Pittsburgh, at the very least. You're not going to find another basketball atmosphere like that.
The Pete used to be the hottest ticket in town. And I really am looking forward to the days where that will return, because it is a special place to play basketball, to watch a basketball game, such a dreaded venue for opponents. And I'm hoping that sooner rather than later, it's going to get back to that.
Let's hope this could be the year for that, Kale. Kale, thanks for joining me, man. Tell them where they can find your stuff, listen to you, read, do all that great stuff.
You can hear me on 93.7 The Fan right now in the middle of Pirates season. So pregame and postgame for your Pittsburgh Pirates. But I'm looking forward to getting back into the fold with Pitt here coming up this fall on the Pitt Panthers radio network, pregame, halftime, postgame. And, you can hear me whenever else on 93.7 The Fan.
Folks, as always, thanks for listening. As we end it here, always, hail to Pitt.